In 2015, archaeologists excavating a sealed burial chamber in an ancient Egyptian tomb made a discovery that stopped the team cold. They found honey. Real honey. In sealed clay vessels, sitting undisturbed for over 3,000 years. And when the team examined it, it was still edible. Not technically preserved in some academic sense. Actually genuinely edible. That is not a legend. That is documented archaeological history. Now, you might think that's a once-in-a-billion anomaly of nature. A perfect accident of desert climate and sealed stone. But here's what I want you to consider. Right now, today in 2024, you can purchase powdered foods with shelf lives that approach that same extraordinary range. 11 of them, to be exact. Several of them cross the 27-year mark under the right conditions. And at least 2 of them are so rarely discussed in the food storage community that most people who have been actively prepping for years have never seriously considered them. Here is the thing that should genuinely bother you. One of these 11 items is almost certainly already sitting in your kitchen right now in its fresh form. And every single week you buy more of it, watch it expire, and throw it away, when the powdered version costs pennies per serving, lasts longer than most people's mortgages, and performs identically in the kitchen once you know a few key techniques. By the time this video ends, you will know exactly which 11 powdered foods belong in your long-term storage, the specific science that makes some of them last for decades, while others fail in months, and the 2 items on this list that the prepper community has almost entirely overlooked, including one with that 3,000-year archaeological case for near immortality. I'm Zach. I've been building and testing real food storage systems since 2012. Not theorizing on the internet. Actually doing it, buying, sealing, rotating, cooking, and tasting these foods across more than 13 years of practical trial and error. And what that experience has taught me is that powdered foods are not just emergency supplies. They are one of the smartest financial decisions a household can make right now in this economy, whether or not anything difficult ever happens. We will come back to that. But first, let's get into the list. Starting with number 1. Item 1. Powdered eggs. The 30-year breakfast. Most people have a visceral reaction to the phrase powdered eggs, something between mild disgust and active skepticism, and honestly, if your only reference point is old military surplus rations from the 1970s, I completely understand that response. It's fair. But modern powdered eggs are a fundamentally different product. And dismissing them without actually trying them means you're leaving one of the most nutritionally complete storage-efficient items off your list for no reason other than an outdated reputation. Here is what matters. Eggs are among the most nutritionally complete foods that exist. 6 grams of complete protein per egg. Fat-soluble vitamins. Choline for brain and liver health. A near-perfect amino acid profile that very few whole foods can match. Fresh eggs last 3 to 5 weeks in the refrigerator. That is the ceiling. Powdered eggs, sealed in a number 10 can or properly prepared Mylar bag with oxygen absorbers, stored in a cool, dark location below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, we are talking a shelf life of 25 to 30 years. One number 10 can contains the equivalent of roughly 84 fresh eggs. That is 7 dozen eggs fitting into a space approximately the size of a large coffee container. The space efficiency alone makes this worth serious consideration. Now here is what almost everyone gets wrong the first time they cook powdered eggs, and understanding why it goes wrong is the key to fixing it. When you mix powdered egg and water and throw it straight into a hot pan, you get something rubbery and strange textured. Here is the actual reason. Egg proteins, primarily ovalbumin and ovomucin, need to fully rehydrate before they will cook correctly. In a fresh egg, those proteins are already in their native hydrated state. In powdered form, they need time to absorb water and return to something close to that state before heat enters the picture. The correct method uses warm water, not boiling, not cold, somewhere around 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Mix 2 tablespoons of powder with 2 tablespoons of water. Then this is the step that makes the difference. Let the mixture rest for 5 full minutes before you apply any heat. That resting window is when rehydration actually happens at the molecular level. Then cook low and slow over medium-low heat with butter or oil. They will not be identical to a fresh egg cracked out of the shell, but they will be shockingly close to it. For baking specifically, powdered eggs are actually more consistent than fresh, because the measurement is exact every single time. Pro tip: powdered eggs are ideal for camping. 0 shells. 0 refrigeration. No wait. Just a small sealed container with weeks of breakfast protein in it. A quality can currently runs around $27. 4 years ago, that same can cost closer to $18. We will revisit that number because it matters to a larger argument. Item 2. Powdered milk, the 25-year calcium bank. Let me say this plainly up front. Powdered milk as a standalone drink is not going to win any competitions. I think we all know that, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But that framing misses the actual purpose entirely. You are not storing powdered milk to pour yourself a cold glass at the end of the world. You are storing it because it delivers calcium, vitamin D, and protein in a shelf-stable form that integrates into dozens of real meals: cream soups, mashed potatoes, bread dough, biscuits, pancake batter, yogurt, cheese sauce, hot chocolate. Here is the critical distinction that almost nobody explains clearly. Full-fat powdered milk has a shelf life of roughly 5 to 10 years. Non-fat powdered milk stored properly in sealed containers with oxygen absorbers carries a USDA-verified shelf life of 25 years or more. The difference is entirely the fat content. Fat oxidizes over time and eventually goes rancid, the same oxidative reaction that makes cooking oil smell off after too long. Remove the fat, and you remove that degradation mechanism entirely. That is verified food science, not prepper folklore. There is something else worth knowing here that most storage guides skip over entirely. Powdered milk is hygroscopic. It actively pulls moisture from the surrounding air. If your sealing is even slightly imperfect, or if ambient humidity in your storage area regularly exceeds about 15% relative humidity, moisture can infiltrate over time and begin clumping the powder together. Clumped powdered milk has not necessarily spoiled, but it is a sign that moisture has entered the container, and that can shorten your effective shelf life significantly. This is why the combination of Mylar bags plus oxygen absorbers plus a cool, low-humidity environment, it is the actual minimum standard for hitting those 25-year targets. Pro tip from a homesteading contact back in 2016, mix your powdered milk the night before, let it steep covered in the refrigerator overnight. The extended cold hydration meaningfully changes the texture and flavor. Add 1 drop of vanilla extract and the smallest possible pinch of sugar. It becomes drinkable. Not remarkable, but functional in a way that makes a difference. And stay with me, because item 10 on this list has a shelf life story that makes even 25 years look almost modest by comparison. We will get there. Item 3. Powdered whey protein, the macro gap nobody has solved. I want you to sit with a real question for a moment. If a supply chain disruption cut off your access to fresh food for 3 months, not a collapse, not a catastrophe, just a serious prolonged disruption, where would your protein come from? Most people answer with beans, canned tuna, dried jerky. And those are reasonable starting points, but they all carry problems. Canned goods are heavy and bulky with a moderate shelf life. Jerky is expensive and sodium dense. And beans, we need to address beans directly, because the prepper community has a widely repeated belief about beans that is simply not accurate. Beans are not a complete protein source. I want to say that clearly, because I see it repeated everywhere. Beans are a valuable food. They belong in long-term storage. I have hundreds of pounds of them personally. But beans are deficient in the essential amino acid methionine. To get a complete amino acid profile from beans, you need to pair them with a grain rice, wheat, corn, which contains the methionine that legumes lack. The combination works. But the individual ingredient does not. And the majority of food storage plans I have seen list beans as a protein solution without listing the grain pairing required to make that protein complete. Whey protein isolate does not have this problem. It is a complete protein by itself, all 9 essential amino acids your body cannot synthesize on its own. A quality 2-pound container of whey protein isolate typically contains 40 servings at around 25 grams of protein each. That is 1,000 grams of complete protein in a container roughly the size of a large jar. Here is the part most sources skip when they mention the shelf life. Whey protein isolate lasts significantly longer than whey concentrate blends, and the reason is the fat content, the same principle we just covered with powdered milk. Whey isolate has had more of the fat removed during processing, which means less oxidative degradation over time. It also has lower water activity than concentrate blends, meaning less available moisture for bacterial growth. Sealed in its original container or transferred to Mylar with oxygen absorbers, quality whey isolate can realistically last 10 to 15 years. Buy isolate, not cheap concentrate blends. Read the ingredient list. If it leads with artificial sweeteners, dextrose, and fillers, it will degrade faster and taste worse over time. Minimal ingredients means maximum longevity. Carbohydrates are easy to store. Grains, pasta, rice, that problem is solved. Protein is the hardest macronutrient to store effectively, and whey isolate is the single most space-efficient complete protein solution I have found in over 13 years of working on this. That is not an opinion. That is nutritional math. Item 4. Powdered soup mixes, the comfort multiplier. There is a dimension to food security that calorie counts and macronutrient ratios cannot capture. And that dimension is comfort. Real psychological comfort. And that is not a soft argument. It is a survival argument. Research from post-disaster environments, including studies following Hurricane Katrina and extended relief operations studied by humanitarian logistics organizations, has consistently found that access to warm, familiar, flavorful food plays a measurable and significant role during prolonged crisis. People who had access to varied, enjoyable food showed better mood stability, better cooperation with others, and better compliance with daily functioning routines than those who did not. Powdered soup mixes give you that comfort in a shelf-stable package with a 25-year potential shelf life. But quality varies enormously, and the difference matters. The $2 grocery store soup packets are mostly sodium, modified starch, and a symbolic gesture toward dehydrated carrot. That is not what we are talking about. What you want are quality dehydrated soup mixes, where split peas, lentils, black beans, or similar legumes appear high in the ingredient list. Split pea soup mix delivers roughly 8 to 10 grams of protein per serving, plus meaningful fiber. Lentil soup brings iron, folate, and a full complement of minerals. Black bean soup is extraordinarily nutrient-dense. Here is something I want you to consider about this particular item. If you look at your kitchen right now, there is a reasonable chance you already have at least one packet of some kind of soup mix sitting in a cabinet, a pouch of ramen seasoning, a packet of onion soup mix, something your mother sent you. Soup mix in some form is almost universally present in American kitchens, which means this is often the easiest gateway item for someone just starting a storage plan. You already buy it. You already use it. The only shift is buying a slightly better version of it and storing it more intentionally. The smartest move: make your own. Bulk dehydrated carrots, celery, onion, and corn from food storage suppliers. Add bouillon powder. Add split peas or red lentils. Season with cumin, garlic powder, black pepper, and bay leaf. Seal in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Your custom mix will cost roughly 40% of what commercial options run, will contain exactly what you want, and will last just as long. One afternoon. Hundreds of servings. Item 5. Powdered cheese, the flavor fatigue insurance policy. Here is something worth sitting with. You have been eating powdered cheese your entire life, and you probably have not thought of it that way. The orange powder in boxed macaroni and cheese? Powdered cheese. The dust-coating cheese crackers? Powdered cheese. The topping at the movie theater popcorn station? Powdered cheese. It is already a normalized, standard ingredient in the mainstream food supply. The only question is whether you are using it intentionally. From a long-term storage standpoint, quality powdered cheddar or blended cheese powder serves two functions. The obvious function is flavor. Adding cheese flavor to rice, pasta, soups, and stews makes those foods dramatically more enjoyable. The less obvious function is fat. Powdered cheese contains meaningful fat calories. And fat, as we discussed briefly with powdered milk, and as we will address directly in Item 9, is genuinely difficult to store long-term in a form that retains its nutritional value over decades. Fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, require dietary fat to be absorbed by your body. If a meal contains those vitamins but contains no fat, the vitamins pass through your system without being meaningfully absorbed. Adding powdered cheese to a meal of rice and beans is not just a flavor improvement. It is potentially the difference between functionally absorbing the vitamins in that meal and not absorbing them. Quality powdered cheese runs 20 years or more in a sealed number 10 can. A large can typically runs $25 to $35 and will season hundreds of meals. Use it to make cheese sauce for pasta. Stir it into scrambled eggs. Mix it into mashed potatoes. Blend it into bread dough for savory biscuits. Combined with powdered milk, it makes a functional cheese dip with nothing fresh required. And there is a term from disaster nutrition research worth knowing here. Sensory-specific satiety. It describes the phenomenon where eating the same flavor repeatedly causes the palatability of that food to drop, even when hunger remains. Your body does not just want calories. It wants variety. And without flavor variety, people in crisis scenarios begin rejecting even nutritionally complete food storage. Flavor variety is not a comfort luxury. It is a consumption necessity. Item 6. Powdered peanut butter. The space-efficient protein. Regular peanut butter is already a popular storage item, and rightfully so, calorie-dense, shelf-stable for 1 to 2 years unopened, protein and fat in a single jar. But it has a structural weakness that powdered peanut butter fixes entirely. The oil. Peanuts are approximately 50% fat by weight. That fat is what gives regular peanut butter both its flavor and its shelf life limit. Even unopened, the oils oxidize over time, and in warm storage conditions like a garage in July. This is why peanut butter stored in a pantry has a useful life measured in months, not years. Powdered peanut butter removes roughly 85% of that fat content through a mechanical pressing process. What remains is concentrated peanut protein and flavor, with significantly extended shelf stability. 7 grams of plant-based protein per 2 tablespoons serving. Lightweight. Compact. And because most of the fat is removed, the caloric density decreases, which is actually an advantage in storage scenarios where you want to maximize nutritional coverage across a wider volume of food rather than concentrating calories. Reconstituted as a spread, the texture is slightly thinner and less rich than regular peanut butter. That takes some adjustment. But as an ingredient, it is outstanding. Stirred into oatmeal, it adds protein and a rounded nuttiness. Mixed into a shake, it contributes flavor and a few extra grams of protein. Made into peanut sauce with soy powder, lime powder, a pinch of chili, and hot water, genuinely excellent. Now I want to stop and reframe something, because most people in the food storage space think about these items exclusively as emergency insurance. I want to suggest they are also one of the most effective inflation hedges available to an ordinary household right now. A number 10 can of quality powdered eggs cost approximately $18 in 2020. The same product today runs closer to $27. That is roughly a 50% increase over 4 years. Not a paper gain, not a number in a brokerage account. A real tangible increase in the value of a commodity you were going to consume regardless. Unlike a stock, it does not go to zero. Unlike gold, you can eat it. Unlike a savings account paying 0.5% annually, it actually tracked food inflation. The framework I think of as the rotation economy works like this. You buy powdered foods, store them properly, and you use them regularly, pulling the oldest stock first, replacing what you consume. You are never hoarding things you will never touch. You are cycling through a living pantry that simultaneously stores value, stores nutrition, and reduces your weekly grocery spend. This framework works whether or not any emergency ever materializes. The economics are sound either way. Item 7. Powdered fruit. The morale multiplier. This is the item that most people skip when they start building a storage plan. And it is often the one they would miss the most severely. When you visualize long-term food storage, the mental image tends to be beige. Rice, oatmeal, pasta, crackers. Nutritious. Functional. And profoundly, relentlessly monotonous. Now think about what a bowl of oatmeal tastes like with real powdered blueberry mixed in. What pancakes taste like with strawberry powder in the batter. What a protein shake becomes when you add mango powder. The difference is not just palatability. It is psychological. There is a documented relationship between food variety and psychological resilience in prolonged disruption. Relief organization logistics studies have found that access to varied, flavorful food, not just adequate calories, produces measurably better outcomes in mood stability, interpersonal cooperation, and functional daily behavior. That is not a qualitative observation. Those are operational conclusions from organizations that have studied what happens when people eat the same food for weeks. Powdered fruit, specifically freeze-dried fruit that has been ground into powder, addresses this directly. Shelf life of 25 to 30 years in sealed mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. The freeze-drying process matters here. Heat dehydration damages certain vitamins, particularly vitamin C, which degrades significantly above 70 degrees Celsius. Freeze-drying removes moisture through sublimation, a phase change process that bypasses liquid and goes directly from solid to vapor, which means the product never reaches temperatures that damage heat-sensitive nutrients. The result is that freeze-dried powder retains the vast majority of the original fruit's vitamin C, antioxidants. You are getting real nutrition in a form that weighs almost nothing. There is also an angle most people overlook entirely. Refined sugar provides sweetness and nothing else. No vitamins, no fiber, no antioxidants. Powdered fruit provides sweetness plus vitamin C plus fiber plus real antioxidant compounds. In a long-term scenario where you are trying to maximize nutritional density from every calorie, that substitution matters. The glycemic impact of powdered fruit is also moderated by its fiber content compared to equivalent amounts of refined sugar. Start with strawberry powder and banana powder, the most versatile and widely applicable. Mango and blueberry next. Store everything in mylar, with oxygen absorbers. But before we get to the item with the actual 3,000-year archaeological evidence, I want to cover the one that works completely invisibly in every single meal you cook. Item 8. Powdered vegetables, the invisible nutrition engine. This item is not exciting. Nobody is getting enthusiastic about powdered spinach. That is fine. The job of powdered vegetables is not to be exciting. The job is to silently and reliably deliver real nutrition into every meal you cook without requiring any fresh produce, without noticeably changing the flavor. Think of powdered vegetables as nutritional infrastructure. Invisible when it is working correctly. Very noticeable when it is not there. Here is the practical reality. You are cooking rice and beans, fine. Nutritionally decent. You add 2 tablespoons of a custom vegetable powder blend. You have just added vitamin A from carrot powder, vitamin K from spinach powder, lycopene and antioxidants from tomato powder, potassium and beta-carotene from sweet potato powder, and a meaningful amount of additional dietary fiber across all of them. Did that change the flavor of the rice and beans? Barely, if at all, in those quantities. Did it meaningfully improve the nutritional density of the meal? Absolutely. The average American currently consumes approximately 15 grams of dietary fiber per day. The USDA recommended intake is 25 grams for women and 38 grams for men. That gap, which can reach 23 grams per day, becomes a serious and immediate digestive health issue during any crisis period when people shift away from fresh vegetables and toward calorie-dense stored staples. Constipation, gut microbiome disruption, and decreased nutrient absorption are among the first-order physical health problems in post-disaster food environments, and inadequate fiber is a primary driver. A single tablespoon of a mixed vegetable powder blend contributes approximately 1 to 2 grams of dietary fiber, modest on its own, but added to every meal across a day, it closes a meaningful portion of that gap. My personal formulation, equal parts powdered spinach, carrot, tomato, and sweet potato, I call it the base blend. 1 tablespoon into soups, stews, pasta sauces, grain dishes. The flavor impact at that ratio is negligible. The nutritional contribution is real. Buy the individual powders separately rather than pre-blended vegetable powders. Pre-blends often have filler ingredients, inconsistent ratios, and you lose control of what you are actually storing. Item 9 requires a brief history lesson. Because the reason fat belongs in your long-term storage plan is darker than most food storage guides will tell you. Item 9. Powdered butter, the fat nobody thought to store. In the late 1800s, Arctic explorers and indigenous Arctic peoples documented a condition that came to be known informally as rabbit starvation, and more formally as protein toxicity, or lean meat syndrome. The situation was this. Hunters eating predominantly rabbit, a very lean animal with almost no body fat, would develop progressive physical deterioration despite consuming adequate or even generous caloric intake. Fatigue, severe nausea, diarrhea, and in cases of prolonged exclusive rabbit consumption, death. Not from starvation. Not from cold. From eating too much lean protein without sufficient dietary fat. Your body requires dietary fat to absorb fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Without dietary fat in the meal, those vitamins pass through your digestive system largely unabsorbed, even if you consume them directly. A diet that is technically rich in vitamins, but severely deficient in fat produces functional vitamin deficiency. The vitamins are present. The body cannot use them. Now here is where most food storage plans have a structural gap that almost no one in this space addresses directly. The USDA dietary guidelines recommend that 20 to 35% of daily calories come from fat. If you take a typical long-term storage plan built around rice, beans, pasta, oats, and canned vegetables and calculate what percentage of its calories come from fat, it frequently falls below 10%. Sometimes significantly below. Most people think they have solved fat storage with cooking oil. They have not. Standard vegetable oil, canola, sunflower, goes rancid within 1 to 2 years even unopened. Olive oil fares somewhat better, perhaps 2 to 3 years. Coconut oil can stretch to 3 to 5 years under good conditions. None of these solve a long-term fat storage problem that spans 10, 20, or 25 years. Powdered butter is real butter that has had most of its moisture and a portion of its liquid fat removed, concentrating the milk solids and a meaningful fat component into a shelf-stable powder. Manufacturer-rated shelf life typically runs 5 to 10 years. Community-reported shelf life in properly sealed Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers runs to 20 years or more under ideal cool, dark conditions. Reconstituted with water, the texture is not identical to melted butter. But as a cooking ingredient, in baking, in mashed potatoes, in pasta, in hot cereal, in butter-based sauces, it performs reliably and adds genuine fat calories to meals that otherwise would have almost none. Start with 1 or 2 cans. Cook with them in your normal rotation before committing significant shelf space to them. Learn how they behave. And if powdered butter sounds unusual, item 10 is one that should be on every serious storage list but rarely appears on any of them, and item 11 is the one we opened this video with. Item 10, powdered coconut milk, the overlooked fat powerhouse. Let me ask you something directly. How many long-term food storage lists have you encountered that include powdered coconut milk? If the answer is few or none, that is the entire point of this item. This is one of the most genuinely underutilized options in serious food storage, and that gap is worth fixing. Powdered coconut milk solves several problems simultaneously. It is a shelf-stable fat source in a category where, as we just established, shelf-stable fat is genuinely hard to store at long timescales. It is a fully dairy-free alternative to powdered milk, which matters for the roughly 30 to 36% of the global population, and it is extraordinarily versatile in cooking in ways that distinguish it from every other fat source on this list. Coconut milk is the base of Thai curries. It thickens soups and stews. It makes rice creamy and aromatic. It works in both sweet and savory baked goods. It mixes into hot drinks as a creamer. And combined with the powdered peanut butter from item 6, peanut powder, coconut milk powder, soy powder, lime powder, hot water, you have a genuinely excellent peanut sauce for rice noodles that requires nothing fresh whatsoever. From a nutritional standpoint, powdered coconut milk is rich in medium-chain triglycerides, MCTs. Unlike long-chain fatty acids, which require processing through the lymphatic system before reaching circulation, MCTs are absorbed directly through the gut wall to the portal vein and metabolized rapidly by the liver. The practical effect is quicker energy availability compared to most dietary fats. During physically demanding emergency scenarios, that metabolic difference is not trivial. Commercial shelf life for sealed powdered coconut milk typically runs 2 to 5 years. Transferred to Mylar bags with appropriately sized oxygen absorbers, stored below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, community experience suggests 10 to 15 years is a realistic working estimate. A 1-pound bag runs $12 to $18 depending on brand and quality, making it one of the most cost-effective fat sources per calorie. Mix powdered coconut milk with powdered cocoa and the item we are about to cover, powdered honey, and you have a genuinely excellent warm drink, requiring only hot water. In a prolonged disruption, that cup of something warm and genuinely satisfying is worth considerably more than its caloric content suggests. And speaking of powdered honey, here we are. Item 11, powdered honey, the archaeologically immortal sweetener. We opened this video in an Egyptian tomb in 2015. We found honey that was 3,000 years old and still edible. I told you we would come back to that. Here we are. That discovery is not an isolated curiosity or a lucky anomaly. It reflects specific scientifically documented properties of honey that give it a shelf life unlike almost any other natural food on Earth. Raw honey produces small amounts of hydrogen peroxide through an enzymatic reaction involving glucose oxidase, an enzyme introduced by bees during nectar processing. Hydrogen peroxide is antimicrobial. Honey's water activity, a measure of the available moisture that microorganisms can use for metabolism and growth, is among the lowest of any natural food, typically below 0.6. Its pH sits between 3.2 and 4.5, which is too acidic for most bacteria and fungi to establish growth. And its sugar concentration is so high, around 80% total sugars, that any microbial cell attempting to colonize it loses water through osmosis and dies. The USDA has classified properly stored sealed honey as having an essentially indefinite shelf life in its raw liquid form. It does not spoil. It can crystallize, a natural physical process that is easily reversed by gently warming the container. The chemistry remains intact across centuries, as the archaeological record has demonstrated. Powdered honey captures these same properties in a more practical storage form. It is lighter than liquid honey and eliminates any risk of container breakage or leakage. It measures and mixes cleanly in dry applications. Sealed in mylar with oxygen absorbers, it carries that same extraordinary shelf stability, 25 to 30 years by most estimates, with the underlying chemistry suggesting even longer is genuinely possible. Nutritionally, powdered honey provides roughly 120 calories per ounce, comparable to refined sugar, but also delivers trace minerals including potassium, calcium, and magnesium, and retains antimicrobial properties even in powdered form. In baking, honey's hygroscopic nature, its ability to attract and hold moisture, produces baked goods with noticeably better texture and shelf retention than sugar alone. As a glaze reconstituted with minimal water, it caramelizes beautifully. In hot drinks, it dissolves cleanly. And here is the angle most people miss entirely. Honey has been used historically not just as a sweetener, but as a preservation medium for other foods. Ancient cultures used raw honey to preserve meats, fruits, and medicinal preparations, the antimicrobial properties that protect the honey itself. In a long-term scenario where conventional preservation methods become limited, powdered honey reconstituted to a liquid state can functionally extend the usable life of other foods stored alongside it. You are not just storing a sweetener. You are storing a preservation agent with a 3,000-year track record. A pound of quality powdered honey runs $15 to $25. For a product with this shelf life profile, this nutritional value, and this range of applications, that represents remarkable value per dollar. That is all 11. Storage. How to make any of these actually last. Knowing what to store gets you halfway. The other half is storing it correctly. Because the most shelf-stable food on Earth will fail in a single year if the storage conditions are wrong. 4 rules cover everything. Rule 1. Temperature. Heat is the single most destructive variable in long-term food storage. There is a principle in food science called the Arrhenius relationship, and in practical terms it states that for every 10° Fahrenheit increase in your average storage temperature, a product rated for 25 years at 60 degrees Fahrenheit might last 12 years at 70 degrees and 6 years at 80 degrees. That is not a small distinction. Store below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Basements, interior closets, and climate-controlled rooms consistently outperform garages, attics, and exterior walls. Rule 2. Moisture. Moisture causes clumping at best and mold at worst. Every powdered food on this list is hygroscopic. It actively draws moisture from the surrounding air. Grocery store packaging is not adequate for long-term storage. Mylar bags or number 10 cans rated specifically for long-term food storage form a genuine moisture barrier. And as we noted with powdered milk, aim to keep your storage environment below 15% relative humidity where possible. Rule 3. Remove the oxygen. Oxygen absorbers are small packets containing iron powder. When sealed inside a container, the iron reacts with the oxygen present, converting it to iron oxide and permanently removing it from the internal atmosphere of the package. Within 24 to 48 hours of sealing, internal oxygen drops to near zero. In that environment, aerobic bacteria cannot grow, oxidative rancidity cannot occur, and insect eggs, which are present in many dry goods even when invisible, cannot hatch. It is straightforward chemistry that dramatically extends shelf life, and it is non-negotiable for hitting the shelf life targets we have discussed. Rule 4. Block light. UV light breaks down nutrients and drives flavor changes over time. Mylar bags are fully light-proof. If you store in clear containers for convenience, keep them inside a dark cabinet or inside an opaque bin. One more variable that virtually every storage guide ignores: altitude. At elevations above roughly 3,000 to 4,000 feet, The pressure differential between the sealed interior of a number 10 can or a vacuum-sealed Mylar bag and the lower atmospheric pressure outside can cause containers to flex, warp, and in some cases develop micro-leaks over time. If you live at significant elevation, periodically inspect your sealed containers for visible bulging or deformation. It does not necessarily mean the contents are spoiled, but it is a sign to reseal or transfer. And one principle that ties everything together: the rotation economy. Do not buy these foods and never touch them. Use them. Pull the oldest stock first. This is called FIFO, first in, first out. Replace what you consume. Your storage stays fresh, your skills with these ingredients stay current, and you never find yourself opening a can in an emergency having no idea how to cook its contents. Closing CTA and next video tease. Before you close this video, I want to give you something concrete, because information without an action is just noise. If you have $50 to start, powdered eggs, non-fat powdered milk, and 1 bag of powdered vegetable blend. Those 3 items alone give you protein, calcium, and a foundation of micronutrients across all your stored meals. If you have $100, add powdered peanut butter and powdered honey. Now you have fat, a complete protein backup, and a sweetener with a shelf life that borders on the mythological. If you have $200, fill in whey protein isolate, powdered coconut milk, powdered cheese, and start your custom soup mix. At that point, your storage is genuinely functional, varied, nutritionally complete, and built to last. Here is my challenge to you this week. Before next weekend, make powdered eggs for breakfast using the rehydration technique we covered. Use warm water, rest for 5 minutes, cook low and slow. That single act of actually cooking with your storage ingredients is worth more than any amount of buying and shelving. Get your hands on these foods now, when there is no pressure, when you can learn without consequences. Because the goal is not a sealed bunker full of items you have never opened. The goal is a living pantry you actually use, one that stores value, delivers nutrition, and gives you real options regardless of what happens with supply chains, prices, or anything else outside your control. If this video gave you one thing you did not have before, a new item to consider, a specific technique you will actually use, a framework that changes how you approach your pantry, that is it. Just one letter. I read every single one, and it tells me this content is reaching the people who need it. If you are new to this channel exists to help you prepare smarter, not harder. Subscribe and you will see exactly what that means every week. And next week, I want to show you the 5 biggest mistakes people make when they actually open their long-term food storage for the first time. Not hypothetically. For real. Mistake number 3 has cost people thousands of dollars in supplies that were stored perfectly, sealed perfectly. You are not going to want to miss that one. Stay prepared. See you then.